our last meeting, just a couple of them, but
yeah, great. Hello, everyone. Hello, Mark. Let's do some intros while we're waiting here. So, Mark, you want to introduce yourself and do a few more? Hi, Kelsey.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mark Aiello. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at a local staffing firm, women-owned firm by the name of Overture Partners.
That's great. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I'm Michael Blake. I'm the CEO of Blake Tech LLC. It's a consulting and software development firm here in Boston.
Very good to see you, Michael. Beverly, you want to say hi? Beverly, you're mute.
Beverly Kahn, the founder of New Dimensions in Technology. We specialize in software, hardware, product management, and marketing. Been in business for over 45 years.
Yeah, great. For folks joining, we're just doing quick intros. Matthew Glidden, you want to say hi, Matt?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, Matthew Glidden. I work as Chief Experience Officer for GeoVero, a tech travel company. And I'm the U.S. person. We have a nice spread of a team in other areas of the continents.
You're covering all of U.S.?
I get all of North America myself, which, as you can imagine, given recent events, is quite a travel market to consider.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, welcome. A few more intros. Go ahead, Crystal.
Hi, Crystal Murray, and I'm just actually volunteering with Paul to help create more awareness around AI in Boston. So thank you for the opportunity, Paul.
That's great. Yeah. Diana?
Oh, yes, thank you. I recently founded Spark Up AI, which is an AI community. It has grown to over 350 members in 6 months. There's a lot of interest in it, and I'm looking to partner with all of you as best we can.
Great. Well, Michael, then Roman. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Davis. I work with Paul at GAI, and I work on building relationships with our partners and customers. Looking forward to listening. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Go ahead, Roman and Sarah.
Roman here, Arlington, Massachusetts, and MIT alumni in space and AI, and I'm a director of AI adoption and transformation into business in Boston space.
Wonderful. Thank you for stopping by. Go ahead, Sarah, and then Jeffrey.
Hi, Sarah Frame. I am the CEO of the Mass Tech Leadership Council. Thanks for, sorry, I'm in the car.
That's right. Yeah, Jeffrey.
My name is Jeff Levitin, part of the AI community in Boston, helping to bring AI to leverage it for improved customer success.
Fantastic. Yeah. Andy Roberts and then Mark. Andy?
Hey, everybody. My name is Andy Roberts. I'm an architect in the Microsoft Innovation Hub in Boston, focused on data and AI.
Go ahead, Mark, and then Bogan.
Yeah, hi. My name is Mark Singh. I run a program called Top Contenders Network. And I'm also CEO of MG Service, a consulting company. And Top Contenders basically help facilitate the growth of a startup company. Thank you.
Good to see you, Mark. Bogan and Christine.
Hi, I'm Bogdan Vrenescu. I'm the Vice President for Research and Innovation at WPI.
Great. Welcome. Christine? She might still be on mute. Well, great. Well, let's go get started. My name is Paul Byer. I think I know just about everyone here. So thank you for joining. I'm really excited. So AI Blueprint for Massachusetts. A lot of you hopefully know that. We're trying to connect groups here. And one of the groups that, I'm in Boston for 30 years. I didn't even know anything about until about 6 months ago was Massachusetts Cooperative Partnership here. So a competitive partnership here. So really delighted to learn more about them and really delighted, just like 3 or 4 weeks ago to find out, Everett and the organization did a really interesting report on entrepreneur service organizations. So Everett, let me turn it over to you. Introduce yourself. Tell us about the organization. Tell us about the report findings for 15, 20 minutes, and then when we can have a discussion. We are recording this, and we're going to put the recording on the AI Blueprint for Massachusetts YouTube here. Go ahead, Everett.
Sure. Thank you very much, Paul. I'll introduce myself briefly, and then Kelsey, if you also want to briefly introduce yourself. So I'm from MACP. But my name's Everett. Hello from the Goddard Library in Worcester, Massachusetts. just finishing up my master's here, almost done it. Paul and I were just talking about that. But I'm a fellow at MACP, a research and policy fellow, and I've been working on this particular project about entrepreneurial support organizations for several months now. We authored a 29-page report, which is available online, and we had a great meeting almost a month ago now in Boston, where we got to share some of the results. So it's a little bit what we'll talk about. Kelsey, do you want to briefly introduce yourself since you're here?
I'm Kelsey Santolo. I head research and policy at the Mass Competitive Partnership, but we do like to be collaborative. So appreciate using that C in different ways. And just a very brief overview, MACP is a nonprofit public policy organization. We have 20 CEOs of some of the largest Massachusetts-based companies really come together to work on initiatives, support public-private partnerships around making Massachusetts more competitive. So growing businesses, bringing more jobs to the state, more economic activity. And we work in a number of areas, but have been really excited to work with entrepreneur support organizations and see how we can bring more to support to those who are supporting. So thank you for setting this up, Paul. We're really excited for the opportunity.
Thanks, Kelsey. So part of where we started with this project was that MACP has a standing committee for innovation entrepreneurship, if I'm not mistaken, right, Kelsey? Something closer to that, right? So that's something that has been a focus of the organization for a long time. And in 2023, MACP released a general report about the state of that ecosystem in Massachusetts. And one of the smaller recommendations included in that report was that entrepreneurial support organizations, which range from business incubators and accelerators to more like collaborative workspaces in general, that's sort of the term that the Commonwealth uses, to everything in between, are maybe something that should have increased focus in our work. So this year, that's what it led to. And maybe that an idea moving forward would be not only to support entrepreneurs and innovators individually and on that scale, but to, as Kelsey was saying, to try and support the people who support them. And in that way, maybe engender some kind of greater community and a stronger network that would make Massachusetts businesses more competitive and make Massachusetts the best place possible to settle as an innovator. So that's something that we were looking at. And the way that started was first with research and looking at our previous report from 2023, and then conducting a survey where we got both qualitative and quantitative figures from people across the Commonwealth. So we reached out to over 30 of the leading ESOs across Massachusetts, and then got good replies from about 25. So working through that, we had some results which I can pull up. Paul, do you mind if I share my screen? I'll just use some of the slides. I should be able to.
Yeah, let me know if you don't have rights, or I can make you. Let me make you co-host. Just there, I can see.
Everyone see that?
Yes.
Great. So this is just some of the slides that we used the other couple of weeks ago. But I'll just go to this one. So the basic findings, and this was the part that I reported out when we were in Boston, was that of the type that we were initially looking at, we were looking most closely at nonprofit business incubators and accelerators. So among those, we found that, this is, I think, not a holistic survey, and that part of the point of this endeavor was to try and get a more holistic picture of the entire ecosystem. But we found about 60 that qualified for the original definition that we were looking at as we started in the survey specifically. Among the 25 that we actually surveyed, we found that they directly employ about 500 people and support approximately 3,000 companies. They manage a combined budget, which is in excess of $80 million, and they've invested quite a bit of money, $250 million in infrastructure and equipment. A lot of those companies, that was something we got less information on. So I think that's just the tip of the iceberg for how much eventually these companies go on to raise. But at least from the 10 that we were able to hear from there, they've raised over $100 billion in capital. So I think something that, the people in this room maybe can attest to, and certainly the others that we've spoken with specifically for ESOs, is that we are really fortunate in Massachusetts and in New England to have a really strong network of collaborators here who are working on this kind of stuff, and people who want to see it be as strong as possible. At the same time, there's a lot of support at the level of state government and in local governments too. However, a lot of other, cities, municipalities, states have been using sort of the playbook that led to Massachusetts' success, and now using it sort of to the extreme where it might be time for Massachusetts to pivot once again and find a way to be as successful as possible working with ESOs. One of the ways that we see that is that on average, survival rates and company sizes and how many people basically end up going into this kind of work are generally lower than the states that have now exceeded Massachusetts, where the Commonwealth was once a leader. And one of the most challenging problems we found in our survey for entrepreneurial support organizations is capital. That has to do partly with just the nonprofit business model in general, and is something that a lot of people in the in civil society struggle with anyway. But the difficulty basically of being a nonprofit that's collaborative, that's really focused on trying to expand access to this kind of important business opportunity and empower people in local communities, and at the same time having people who are working in the as all of you, I'm sure from your experience, are aware, the sometimes cutthroat world of startup economics can be quite challenging. So access to capital was something that was difficult, and something that we saw was something that ESOs are struggling with, despite the good community here. And there are lots of state resources that exist in Massachusetts, but they aren't necessarily consolidated in one place. That was a finding actually of the 2023 report, was that there should be a one-stop shop. There's lots of disparate grant programs, which sort of form a patchwork quilt. As much as we're encouraged by what the Executive Office of Economic Development has been doing, and I think they've really been doing a lot of heavy lifting and largely concur with our findings here. There's a lot more to do, especially when we were looking at other states who have more united programs. So all in all, the Commonwealth, we felt, was taking a lot of steps in the right direction, and that now more than ever, even in an unstable and economy, the way things are going now, and where the general mood is dominated so much by uncertainty, it might just be the right time to invest as much as possible in the local communities here in Massachusetts, and to reaffirm our commitment to that strength. Which leads us to some of the basic recommendations that we had. There are 7 here, and I'll just walk through them. The first that we're working on, starting actually just this week, is building out a statewide ESO network. That was something we found in common with some of the states that are doing the most to be able to support startup organizations, and also the entrepreneurial support organizations that often host them, is by having some kind of formal, or whether it's public or public-private partnership, or something private even. That's mostly the case in Florida, for example. Either way, all of those models are more robust than the smaller communities that we have in Massachusetts. Not to say that the work they're doing isn't critical, but we found from looking at other jurisdictions that there's might be a role for the Commonwealth, or just for the ESOs, and that's who we're starting with, in trying to build that kind of community, to make sure that there's a knowledge sharing going on. But also because the spirit, we've been told time and again, here is largely collaborative. As Kelsey was saying, it is competitive is in the name, but we want all of us to be competitive with other states. Otherwise, we know the atmosphere in Massachusetts is really pretty collegial. So that's something that we're working on, and this Friday we'll be having a meeting here in Worcester to try and get a sense of who's involved, and maybe who isn't there, who should be, and then whether or not there's interest in trying to deliver that kind of stuff in Massachusetts. The state's role in that is establishing an ESO council. In brief, what that means from our recommendation is that all of the different organizations in state government, from the executive level to the quasi-public organizations we have in Massachusetts, like Mass CEC or the Mass Tech Collaborative, or Mass Ventures, the leadership of those organizations, where possible, we recommend it should come together to be able to talk about this kind of thing, because it's clearly of great importance to the state economy. We also feel that being able to celebrate the work that ESOs are doing to support our entrepreneurs across the Commonwealth could really be increased, and that's something that's really important. That's a general recommendation, I guess, for anything like this, but we feel that it has a lot of utility in trying to make sure that we really honor the work that's going on and promote it in the future. The other thing that meetings like this, I think, are really important for, is strengthening private sector engagement. And probably what we mean by that is that the spirit and interest, maybe of risk taking, for example, has changed quite a bit over the last few years. That's not the only reason that we mention it, but on the beginning and end of the startup cycle are sort of where entrepreneurs need the most support, working to getting a minimum viable product to eventually having an organization stand up on its own. There's a lot of support that ESOs can provide for all of those, but those early stages of taking a risk on a new technology or a new idea, something that will, wherever it will be benefiting a community, or working on to its way to the global market, or Main Street here in Massachusetts, that's somewhere where they need a lot of help. And in both ways, we think that the private sector can really be of assistance there. In the same way, among the ESOs that we were looking at, higher education has a real role to play here. And our basic recommendation is sort of similar to the second one on this list, is that there should be more collaboration. More of these people who clearly share interests should be talking more. Whether it's through the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities in Massachusetts, through the state colleges system in Massachusetts, whichever way it works. But the general finding is that the vast majority of the leading colleges and universities in Massachusetts have increasing interest, it would seem, in entrepreneurship and innovation, and many of them have their own on-campus ESOs. Some of them are able to do quite a lot to serve their communities, and that was something that came across from other organizations telling us that, especially at UMass campuses like at UMass Lowell or UMass Boston, have a big influence in their region and are able to do more than just support their students on campus. That's something I see here at Clark, is that every Wednesday we have a pop-up, in that entrepreneurial spirit that one might not necessarily expect to see coming out of a liberal arts university, is actually really strong. So the same point there sort of is that I found that all but one of the Massachusetts state colleges and universities already had that kind of program. So there's a lot more room, I think, for higher ed collaboration, especially in that first phase of spinning out technologies, or just in encouraging students to be able to give them the resources that they need to be able to step into this world that so many of you are well established in already. The last part, which I've sort of suggested a little bit, so I won't go into too much detail, is just looking closely as a group at best practices from other states, not necessarily copying them, because that's not the most effective way, but looking at what's worked for them, how they've adapted, partly what I said, what made things work initially so well in Massachusetts, and how we can bring some of those good ideas here and adapt them and adopt them for our own practices and purposes. The last part is a financial investment, and this is something that we understood as a proposal is a little bit more difficult to deliver on sometimes. But basically, we had an idea for two 10-year, $100 million initiatives. The first one would be to support, these are both grant initiatives that would be given out to entrepreneurial support organizations and to startups through entrepreneurial support organizations. We felt there was a strong need for this kind of money. I mean, everything needs more support in some ways, but that there was a real need for this because of two reasons. So that first bucket would be for general capital expenditures, organizational costs, and then some grants that would go through directly to ESOs. To entrepreneurs through ESOs. That was a need that was seen. The other $100 million would be to try and supplement some of the existing grant programs that the Commonwealth has for facilities development or large capital projects, to try and encourage the sort of work that we saw happen at Mass Robotics, for example, or the Berkshire Innovation Center in Pittsfield. Those are things that happen with lots of strong collaboration with state government. And that's another thing we realized for a lot of the ESOs, is that many of them feel sort of limited being able to make the next step up to being maybe a regional hub, or increasing the reach that they had to be able to support as many people as possible. So that was our proposal to the Commonwealth, and something to consider in the future. But that's the brief rundown of why we did the report, how we did it, and then what it led to. So we're working on trying to facilitate conversations for all of these, but as I said, we're starting with number one just this week.
That's great, Everett. Yeah, so if you have questions, raise your hand and I'll call and be moderator. Everett, let me play back, make sure I understood this. Report focused on ESO. Most of the ESOs are nonprofits. The implicit theory is that these startups are so fragile, having a more robust nonprofit ecosystem around there is one way to accelerate it. And the report recommendation is to put $100 million that would go and fund more of these ESO organizations to sprout the startups. Is that the right thesis?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, Paul. I think it's taking I would say a calculated bet on what we think is a really proven system for organizing. In this case, being ESOs. It's something that from our view, the Commonwealth really sees as an asset, and a lot of entrepreneurs that we have connections with are able to see the benefit of that. So that's the basic thesis.
Are there what states do you think that we can learn the most from? Is California doing this really well, or New York?
Yeah, New York is one that really stands out, and their model is interesting. It's mostly delivered through NISTAR, which is the science and technology innovation division of their economic development organization at the state level. And their particular approach, in brief, is that for entrepreneurial support organizations, including accelerators, they have a certification system, which might not necessarily be something we want to do in Massachusetts. But it's a system where across the entire state of New York, different ESOs can apply to be this program to essentially be endorsed by the New York State's Development Corporation. And then they get added to this list and get guaranteed funding every year. And it lasts for, I think it's 5 years. So that's the sort of period that it works through, and it does that both for entrepreneurial support organizations and then for larger regional hubs, which is something that we observed happening in Ohio and in Michigan as well, where they did a really good job focusing it on delivering regional economic support, where an ESO, whether it be anchored, through a nonprofit organization in general, or one that's affiliated with a research university, like the University of Michigan, for example. Those were two models that also seemed interesting, but the uniting theme for all of them, including Kansas, which was one I thought had a pretty good example too. It's a program called Network Kansas, is that at the state level, they're able to promote everything that these organizations are doing, just the basic stuff, through a website, through state staff that have this kind of access. And the thing that we're really encouraged by is that Massachusetts is starting on this path with a new program that's just launched called the Business Front Door. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's a new website on mass.gov, which has a lot of this information that other states are able to list. And the thing that's really neat, I think, about in New York State or in Michigan, for example, is that they have it all out there, on a page. We have a map of, for example, across Michigan, where all these smart zones is what they call them are, which have that anchor organization and then ESOs and entrepreneurs that are connected, and then all the contacts that you would need and the related grant programs that you could take advantage of. So those are some state programs that we looked at. But there are other smaller examples of trying to drive research that I think a lot of people have already maybe looked at that are less focused on ESOs, like North Carolina's Research Triangle, and Florida and California are two that I'd like to look at more in the future. But those three states in particular, Ohio, Michigan, and New York, were ones that we thought showed a lot of promise in terms of their model.
I'm going to keep driving quite. I've got a bunch.
I have a couple. Can
Go
I
ahead.
just...
You got jump in, Mark, please.
Yeah. Everett, I have two questions. On the surface, it seems like a really good idea. The first question is, tell me why it's not. And the second is, short of writing a $200 million check, I'm sure we can put our piggy banks together. But short of doing that, what is it that you'd like us to do? So tell me why it's not a good idea, and then tell me what you'd like us to do.
Thanks for a good question, Mark. I love to sit where your background is on a day like today.
Me too.
Yeah, why wouldn't it? I think one of the negatives that comes to mind for me, and is something that I think I'd really like to address as we move forward with facilitating conversations, is the ways in which that this might supersede or leave behind existing networks in Massachusetts. For example, in Boston and in other areas of the state, there's already a lot of smaller organizations that are trying to do this at a smaller scale. And I wouldn't necessarily want to see, or let me be bolder there. I would not want to see a statewide organization trample the work basically that's going on, which is a lot more sensitive to local communities. I think the way that we can address that going forwards, and it's something that I hope we can talk about this Friday in Worcester, is being able to keep those organizations and sort of empower them in the way that the other states I was just talking about have done, sort of making them regional centers, or trying to incorporate them in some way, and not try and step on the toes of organizations like that. So that's my answer to your first question. I'm sorry, I got wrapped up in it. Can you remind me of the second part?
What would be the ask? What can we do?
The ask. I think part of it is there's still a lot of information, and I guess this is pretty straightforward, but I feel like you might be able to tell from I think it was a good representative sampling, the survey that we did, but I still feel like there's missing pieces. So engagement, being able to meet all of you here and hear about all the important work that you're doing is really useful. And I feel like if we can keep that conversation going some way, Kelsey might have more to say about this, about what engagement would look like in the future, but I feel like there's more that like if there's any missing pieces, that's the biggest thing for me, because to be perfectly frank, as I've sort of explained from the beginning, I lack some of the worldly experience, particularly in actually, doing the job of being in the business world, only because of my, my lack of years. So that kind of experience is something that I don't think we necessarily missed, because Kelsey and Jay were very much involved in making sure that the report itself was holistic. But in the conversation, it's something that I would not pretend to lead by myself. So that's something I think is an important ask, not just for me, but like for MACP in general, is what are we missing? Because I still, that's always my suspicion whenever I'm working on any project, is I'm leaving something out. So anything like that, whether today or another time, I think is really useful.
I think Everett's
Kelsey, do
being
you
a
want to
little
add something?
modest here, but right on in terms of you don't know what you don't know. And so we have our networks, but the fact that Paul didn't know about us, we didn't know about you. So it's really this type of opportunity and bringing together the network and making sure that we're, when Everett started this project a few months ago, I emailed him a spreadsheet of entrepreneur organizations that another fellow years ago had started putting together, right? And so it was sort of which ones are outdated, which ones are actually active, what are we missing? And so a lot of what he did was just, even from that start, finding a ton that we didn't know about. And even, a week up to the report, we were getting the word out. We were getting people registering for the event and saying, hey, what about my organization? And so I think the more that you can connect us into your work, into your networks, just to make sure that we have a full understanding of this ecosystem, and really hoping to provide an opportunity then to connect the ESOs into that so that they can, find these other resources as well.
Good, Michael.
Well, I think this is a lot of great work. One question I had was on the ESOs. You're talking about different size ESOs. Are there any recommendations on small, medium, large ESOs and how they should engage with these entrepreneurs and startups?
Thank you for that question, Michael. And it raises a really important point and suggests, well, two things to me. One is that in Massachusetts, we do have the benefit of having large international ESOs, basically, that are based in Boston, for example, or elsewhere in the Commonwealth. And we also have a lot of really small, focused ESOs that are either working on particular problems, even in small communities, or that are started by economic development corporations, or that have like a social justice element that you wouldn't want to lose at scale, for example, but others like Entrepreneurship for All, E4All, I think are doing a good job at. So in terms of the scale, that's sort of why we hoped, or in our recommendations, didn't necessarily want to propose something that was too prescriptive, and wanted to try and strike the balance and make sure that all the sizes, that if we just categorize them into like small, medium, and large, which I think works fairly well, I don't think it would be beneficial to lose out on having all that breadth of scale. And one of the ways that we suggest that in terms of like funding, for example, is that the strengths, I suppose, of like the kinds of systems in other states that I was talking about before, is that they're able to connect like large economic development projects with the right minds, and then also with the right companies. But it doesn't necessarily always support small business, for example. And we want to do as much for the main streets in Massachusetts as we're doing for the financial district in Boston. And being able to do that in every city, I think, means, like, for our recommendation, that the grants aren't like tied to necessarily like large performance things always. And that's something I think the most important thing we can do at this stage going forward is trying to involve entrepreneurs and professionals from ESOs at every basically level that we were just talking about, and not just having one of those groups represented.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, being able to find the appropriate funding and the appropriate help that people need. Not necessarily the largest or the smallest, but what's appropriate.
Yeah, and we were hoping maybe that what could work well was just, I mean, it would be time consuming, I suppose, but we want to do it right. And I think in a perfect world, you know, the support that's offered from the state level or from the private sector would always be calibrated on a case by case basis.
Thank you. Thank you for all the good work too.
Everett,
thank you.
Kelsey, I've got a question, and I think other people in the audience maybe have better thing. I'm still trying to get my head around what the ultimate goal and success is. So these startups are fluid. So you put $10 million to a startup, it stays in Massachusetts, and it hires all employees offshore. Is that success? Google takes, puts 5,000 people in their office in Cambridge, but they're not located in. So is it jobs? Are we trying to get employment for the state? So there's that. Are we also trying to get startups that start in a state and then become profitable? So it's tax revenue at the startup level here. Because if it's also employment thing here, we should go encourage, people to put their remote offices in here. So can ESOs also help with the next Google? OpenAI should be putting them. We should be courting OpenAI. So do you have a view on it? So part of it, I mean, is so much of these ESOs feels very traditional, i.e. 30 years ago, where you put the servers in a rack and you hired only locally and the internet didn't exist. I'm really dating myself there. But anyway, I'm kind of curious how you think about what specific success looks like in this world of fluid staffing.
Everett, you want me to take it or you want to jump in? Or
you can start and then I can jump in.
Yes, and yes. I mean, I think we're really just looking at how do we bolster and kickstart the Massachusetts economy and what that means in 2025. To your point, Paul, because I think we do have a very traditional sense of it, just because that's what we've done, and that when we think about Massachusetts and being such an innovative place, our playbook for supporting new companies and looking at industries like the life sciences, for example, is one that other states saw the success of and then kind of took that playbook and ran with it, which is why we're kind of revisiting now, we really put a lot into life sciences, and now we have an amazing ecosystem here, and how do we do that for other areas? And one thing we've talked a lot about is we have so many strengths. Just choosing one or two winners is really hard, because we have all of this activity, we have all of these companies, all of these technologies. So how do we really spread that around? So I think we're really looking at it holistically in terms of, more companies, more jobs. How do we just make sure that those who are looking to build something or looking at Massachusetts, or those who are in Massachusetts and want to build something, have the resources that they can to do that?
I mean, one opportunity that one, I mean, I'm just probably mainly because it's happened 20 times in the last year, is particularly Israeli startups and US and European startups. They get going, they want to go to the US market here. They don't always want to fly all the way out to Silicon Valley and deal with all time zones. So they're saying, boy, what's my first step across the Atlantic pond? And, Everett, from what you saw in the ESOs, would that be in their mission, or is that kind of outside their mission because they're not indigenous to the Commonwealth soil?
Yeah, I think we're looking at both, and Kelsey before hit the nail on the head. But that's a good question. Do we want to? And I think that's something that we need probably more of, and that's why, for the ESO Council, we want very much for the state office of, I don't know if I'll be able to get this acronym right, excuse me, but of international trade investment. I don't remember exactly what it is. MOIDI. Yeah, I think I got it. They should be involved. And part of the other thing from looking at the adaptation that's happening is that one, as everyone in this room is really well aware, working with AI, the business world and everything else it's related to in terms of the human condition is changing rapidly. And so, ESOs are a pretty traditional model that comes from the late 80s, early 90s, if I'm not mistaken. But I think partly what we heard through our survey too was that there might be ways to change this sort of to include the hub model, which is something that Kelsey added in the latter days of finishing up this report. But one thing we heard, for example, and an example that MACP is closely involved in is the Massachusetts Mobility Hub. But there was one survey response which really stuck with me from when we were doing the survey in the fall, which was that instead of having an ESO that's specifically focused on bringing in particular types of businesses to then hopefully like have a particular return on investment. Many of them are themed around attacking a particular subject area already or industry vertical. But this one person's suggestion, and as it sort of plays into the hub idea, which might be sort of the innovative way to do it, is that instead you form a group of people, maybe through an ESO, that are there to solve a problem. So the example for like the Mass Mobility Hub that he gave was like, we're not there just to fix traffic. It's like, what other actual challenges can we orient the ESO around? And then you bring in, I don't know, more, then like it's a basically call for proposals for people that have a specific reply to that. That's sort of the more innovative model that he suggested. So you're right that it's a really traditional way, but I feel like this is something where there's, we're still in the room with a lot of innovators. It's going to have to change in some ways, but I think there's still a lot of strength in the basic principle of just getting all these smart people in the same building.
Well, great. Well, Everett, thank you. Let's start wrapping up. Everett, thank you so much for the report. It's really nice to start getting to know your organization here. One commercial, June 4th, I think it's Christine, at Museum of Science. We're having a panel discussion on the AI ecosystem. We'll have Jay, president of MACP there. We'll have Yvonne Howe, the former, I guess in 2 days, a former economic secretary of development. And we have Chloe, who is an MIT student there to talk about it. So if you're around there, please join us. And this is a great, Kelsey, any other last things, or do you have newsletters people should sign up for, or events, or contributions you want, or what's your ask of this team here?
I think we just love to keep you engaged, and if there is a way that we could collect your contact info, that we can have it ready to go and get some way. I think after this meeting on Friday, we're really trying to bring the ESOs together. I think we'd love to connect you into that network, because we're really looking for them in terms of what they need from us and how we can be a convener for them. For MACP, we have a business impact bulletin that you can sign up for, but that's really more just about the great work that businesses are doing, their social impact work. So not quite as directly related to this topic, but that is our newsletter. I can throw a link in the chat, but if there's any way, I'll grab all your LinkedIn's, and maybe Paul, if you could help us do a blast.
Yeah, I think I have registration on it. If everyone's okay, I'll send you the registration stuff. I think it's got
perfect. Thank you.
And Kelsey, are you guys thinking about calling a Zoom on the convening side, calling a Zoom call 2 months from now from the 60 just to meet, or you mentioned 60? I mean, is that list going to come together and you're going to have Zoom meetings or coordinate, or how do you guys think about
I think that's what we're trying to determine and really working. So Friday, we're bringing a good portion of that list together. And I think the goal for Friday is to figure out how we want to move forward from there.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining on short notice here. And Everett, fantastic. Congrats on a good report, and good luck. I know you've got a master's degree you're finishing up in 14 days or something. So good luck on that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Almost done with finals. So thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paul.